Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in January 2021. We're going to start with an AIMA, which is Ask Me Anything to the OWASP board. So we have some members of the OWASP board here, and the Andrew, which is the executive, which you will clarify in a second,
Yes.
the actual job title. And the idea here is to also to start with also a forum where we can bring questions, we can have good conversations, we can do challenges, and we can basically have a good conversation about, actually in this case a topic which is very close to my heart. OWASP. I've been involved for a long time on it, and I still think it's an amazing organization, and this is an opportunity to go deeper. So if you have questions, put them on a chat. I'll bring them in right as you guys do it, and then we'll take it from there. So maybe Andrew, Grant, Vandana, do you want to just quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, I'm Andrew Vanderstock. I've been around OWASP for the better part of 20 years. I wasn't there right at the very beginning, but I was there soon after. I have been on the board. I'm the current executive director, and I'm the top 10 co-lead and the application security verification standard co-lead.
Grant?
My name is Grant Ongers. I haven't been around as long as Andrew has, mainly because I come from ops and security side and have moved towards development, and that's where I found OWASP. I am on the global board of directors as from the beginning of last year, and I am very happy to be serving the board. I am also involved quite heavily with the Education and Training Committee and with helping to build the application security curriculum for OWASP. And I've also recently joined the Cornucopia project as a co-lead. That's
awesome.
Me.
Cool.
Vandana?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Vandana. About my span with OWASP, it goes back in 2011-12, where I started getting to know more about OWASP, and then being a volunteer, then becoming a lead for Bangalore, which I'm still. And in 2019, I got an opportunity to be on the board. So Grant and I joined at the same time. It's been a really amazing journey with OWASP. I've learned a lot. I've got an opportunity to serve at different points, and then share a lot of my experience with the community, learn from the community. And recently I started a new project called Spotlight Series, where we are trying to highlight the different projects that are there, and like what they do, because there are so many amazing projects which OWASP has along with the chapters around the world. So why not people know about it? So that's what Spotlight is all about.
Cool. We're definitely going to come back to that one. So the first question is actually, what is OWASP?
Okay. OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project, and there has been talk about maybe renaming ourselves, but the reality is that we've got a pretty decent brand here. The reality is that we're the largest organization and a nonprofit foundation to sustain various standards and documents that people use, like the OWASP Top 10, but many others, including OWASP, OpenSAM, and many others. We've got over 200 and something chapters around the world, so you can actually meet people. And Dinis, I know you've been pretty heavily involved in the London chapter. We rely upon our community to drive our mission, and I look forward to seeing what happens in the next 20 years.
Cool. So I think the first one I wanted just to tackle, right? And I think it's a topic very relevant, right? Given the lockdown, right? OWASP, one of the centers of gravity of OWASP has been events, right? So we'll talk about the projects a bit later, right? So you got the London chapters, and you got the AppSec conferences. And OWASP, has the best AppSec conference in the planet, right? Because it's focused on AppSec, right? And it's quite a spectacular event, right? So how did you a transition, right, in 2020 and now actually 2021? And again, what did you do, and best practices, and sort of how you see moving forward?
So we had to transition pretty quickly to a virtual event provider, which we hadn't done before, so we learnt a lot. The board assisted us with making some decisions around what we were trying to do. We tried out the Big Ask platform. That wasn't probably as successful as I would have liked. So we're going to continue to experiment, fast fail, and keep on going. We've got a number of events throughout this year. We've got, in fact, this morning, I can confirm that we've managed to book Frederick Stock for a bug bounty tutorial in March. So, you know, we've got training this month on all sorts of stuff coming along. The reality is we are hoping to run AppSec Australia as a global event this year. They've just entered lockdown again. So we're hoping that the vaccine will work by then. Australians don't have as much of a problem with vaccines as others countries might. So, and they've shown a willingness to lock down if things get out of control. So hope to have one physical event this year. Next year, we're going to be in Dublin and in San Francisco later in the year than we would normally, but we're going to make it go. We're going on the assumption that people will have had enough herd immunity through the vaccine that we can do a socially distanced event with some safety.
That's this year, right? Well, hopefully next year.
Next year.
Normal.
Yep.
And how are you viewing, you know, the sort of virtual and physical, right? And I guess what's interesting is that given the widespread of OWASP, right? Because you can almost like throw a dart at the map and you're going to hit a chapter, right? You know, are you seeing, you know, the sort of the bits that are off lockdown and the bits that are in lockdown, and how you're doing those events, especially on the chapter level?
Well, it actually is an opportunity in many ways. So I've asked the events folks to coordinate events in different time zones. Like the Frederick Stock one will be in the European time zone. I'm hoping to have a bigger event, a bigger virtual event somewhere in the Indian time zone. Obviously, AppSec Australia will be possibly a hybrid event, possibly a physical event. We don't know yet, but that'll obviously be the Asia Pacific time zone. So we're trying to cover our global mission by having events in different time zones. Plus, because it's virtual, people can join from all over the world as long as they're prepared to be awake at that time. So it's a lot of opportunity for us as well as, you know, difficulties, but it advances our mission in many new ways that we haven't been able to do before.
We've also seen chapters having speakers from everywhere now, and people joining a particular chapter meeting, not because that chapter happens to be in their city or their location, but because they're interested in the topic. Earlier in the year, Vandana and I we got involved with a community effort. It wasn't run from the board, it was run from the community. The chapters all day. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, sure. So Chapters All Day was the one initiative where we wanted to involve every chapter, because we talk about chapters, but then bringing all of them at one place. They bring their own local speakers. Let's say right now I am in India or Bangalore. I bringing in local community members, so that from local to the international community, we had that event, and for 24 hours. So for 24 hours, we have 49 speakers. Now that was funny part where we divided the timing accordingly. We were supposed to have 48 chapters, but then there was one chapter who also wanted to be part of it, so we included that as well. And that became a really, really nice initiative. And probably we will have the similar thing this year as well. And not just that, there's one thing which Grant mentioned, that the different chapters have started inviting different leaders. So we had a Bangalore meet just this weekend, and we invited Sam Stephen. And then similarly, I was invited for New York meet just the week before this. So it's like we are becoming more closer to each chapter, even though we are in lockdown, we are in pandemic, but we are becoming more and more closer. We are learning new things, like how to engage more audience, what different things that we can come up with, and how we all can work together on these things. Like OWASP, a lot of events happened last year, and hopefully this year also we are planning a lot of events, which Andrew can speak more about. But I think that actually brought us more closer to the community. We had wonderful trainings, like that served amazingly. And every global AppSec conference, or every AppSec conference we had a free training as well for the community. We sponsored a lot of students and people who wanted to kickstart their career in AppSec.
I just also want to mention that we want to have committees. One of the reforms that I'm doing this year is to get events decoupled from chapters so that committees and projects can host their own events in the same way that chapters could. So you can actually have projects like OpenSAM run an OpenSAM conference, or WEA run a WEA event. And there's going to be scholarships and awards, which allows these various committees, like the projects, chapters, or WEA, or outreach, to actually sponsor people to come from underserved communities. So this is actually something that's really important to me, is to make sure that we actually start getting themed and actually helping hold more events of different types. I think it's going to be quite important.
Yeah, and that's a massive opportunity, right? I always felt that one of the massive untapped resources that OWASP never really explored properly was the fact that, you know, you don't need to have somebody physically at the location to actually be a speaker, right? And especially the more remote you are as a chapter, the harder sometimes it is to find those SMEs, right? And the biggest challenge you always have was to, you know, to get speakers, right? So I think it's great. Do you have any thoughts on the post world? So at the moment, we all being forced, right, into use remote, right? But I actually think that, like you're saying, right, you know, allowing the remote participation model, right, especially as a first-class now citizen situation, you know, brings a lot of opportunities, right? Widens the scope, widens the talent pool that can do it. What you're seeing in terms of actually getting the best of both worlds once we go back to normal events, right?
It'll definitely be additive. We won't be stopping doing virtual events once we go back to doing in-person events. A really key thing for me is to actually diversify the foundation's funding sources, and having these virtual events throughout the year, particularly around topics of interest like, you know, CISO, or in Colorado Springs here where I live, we have a very large defense sector. I'd love to see a chapter themed around defense, or finance, or whatever the case may be. Automotive out of Detroit. There's a whole bunch of places that we could actually do really good and interesting things to get that community of interest. And I think that's probably the way forward for many chapters. We're establishing a speakers bureau, so we can actually find speakers virtually.
Yeah.
So Dinis,
can you expand on the sort of the? Oh,
I was going to say, are you picturing an audience full of people in a room and a white screen up the front with somebody virtually joining from the other side of the planet?
Well, I think that there is, you know, in the past, right, remote participation was also second-class citizen, right? It was always either it was a one-way out, or even when you could participate, it was not well thought through, right? And I think now that we are all having good sessions, right, remotely, I think there's an opportunity to rethink that, right? To make sure that not only the persons who happen to be at that magical moment, at that magic situation, who actually can go to the room, can actually have a good experience, right? And if it's a case where you would decrease the experience a little bit for the on-site participants, but you make it much better for the remote, I think that's worth thinking about. Not just actually on events, even on regular meetings, right? Even as we meet in business.
Please, one more thing is there. Oh, Grant, you were saying something?
Carry on.
That it's psychological also. Like, now people have accepted that this is the new normal, and when we have to learn something new, when we can't travel, when we can't move out of the house, we all have not traveled for like good 1 year now, and this is the way to go. So why not start learning from the very beginning and start accepting that yes, we can learn from the online events as well. We all know that it's not as good as asking somebody in person when we are like, there's a personal touch, but people are just trying to make sure that you have a personal touch, giving the room to the participants, and letting them come up with their own way of asking questions, like the way we are doing AMA. So yes.
So a number of the chapters, and it's already before lockdown, would have live streaming of the presentations, and they would only accept questions to the speaker via Slido, which means whether you're remote or you're in the room. If you're in the room, you're sitting on your phone quickly. If you're remote, then you have your keyboard at your desktop, and that works. And I think you're right. We need to do more of that. So it does slightly decrease the in-person feeling because you're not actually asking the question, But by the same token, it does make it much better for people who can't get to that room because it's on the other side of the world or in a different time zone or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And if you go to Andrew's point, right, of creating almost guilds, I feel like you were describing as a guild, Andrew, but
Yeah.
or a chapter on a topic, right? Then
Yes.
the people that are involved become very important, right? Like in a way to have the subject matter experts of a particular topic in the same room, virtual room, let's say, right, becomes very relevant because when somebody asks a question, you know, the body of knowledge that is able to answer is much bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to ask the community for their questions to the board? I mean, I've talked a lot, and I think, you know, it'd be good to actually hear from the community a bit.
Absolutely. Right. Anybody has a question? Now that you could also raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Or right. Not everybody at the same time.
Well, then let's continue with the questions that you had set up.
Well, if you have a question, please, you know, raise your hand. Right. I bring you guys in. Right. So the question I wanted to go on that topic that you talked about, which is the sustainability for OWASP, and not just OWASP, is all sorts of online organizations, right? Which, and I think you were spot on to say that OWASP needs to diversify, right? And the more it diversifies income, right? Because, you know, OWASP was pretty hit badly with the lack of conferences, right? What's kind of your plans on it and ideas on that topic?
Okay, this is a really long conversation that I'm going to have some town halls on very shortly. We're doing finance reform, and we're going to reform the way chapter balances and everything work. The way that we're going to do this is every single part of our mission will have an opportunity to earn money and spend money. And the easiest way for us to do that is to start saying, well, events shouldn't be carrying the foundation's mission because it got to a certain size and we couldn't grow. Whereas we do need to, you know, this is an area that Josh Sokol and I used to disagree with when I was on the board, but he's absolutely right. We can't grow OWASP just by concentrating on holding more events. We need to have more income sources. So we're looking at various things like a trademark program. We're looking at things like, for example, and the things that I've already instituted, such as regional membership. You can now join if you're from countries in the lower 50th percentile for $2,000 a year as a corporate sponsor. We've never had that before. You can also do that over a monthly basis. So I'm making it as easy as possible to become a corporate supporter of OWASP. There's also startup pricing and things like that that we put in place. We're trying as hard as we can to do things like merchandising, and we're going to be resurrecting books online. We want to get OWASP books online again, but we need to redo that. Lulu was okay, but I think we need to do better. And I think, you know, I'm going to involve the project leaders in coming up with a good-looking PDF of their current output and getting it published through a self-publishing mechanism of some description. We need to envisage new ways of earning income, and then I want to see a situation where in the future, like in 2024, OWASP only relies on about 30 to 35% from event income. I want us to be able to say if there was a downturn in any particular area, like there was another depression or something like that, corporate membership shouldn't be 80% of our income. You know what I mean? There are many organizations that have huge corporate fees, like I won't mention some particular foundations, but I think we all know who they might be, that if those large organizations stop sponsoring them, they would be in considerable difficulty because they have no other income sources. Like we had no income sources once events went away. So it is a challenge, I won't lie, but we're trying to face that challenge head on by diversifying our income source this year, diversifying and improving programs and member benefits, and making sure that we actually have a way forward whilst leaning out the organization as much as we possibly can.
So you lead me to a question which I had almost at the bottom, but you know, it's a nice hairy topic. Are you saying that you're going to consider OWASP certifications?
That's the education committee's job. I want the community to lead that conversation. I would, yes, but it's not my conversation to be having. It's something that the industry certification side of things, I think we should probably start with probably trainer certification, because I think that's manageable in terms of size and what we could manage. I don't want people to just pay us money and say you're OWASP certified. I want that to actually be something that's meaningful. And the only way for that to happen is for the education committee to come up with some sort of program, and the community has to be behind it. There is obviously a section of our community that is very anti-certification, but there are more and more governments that require it. And I'd rather OWASP be the people earning money from that rather than another organization that doesn't have OWASP at its heart. You know what I mean? I wouldn't mind I wouldn't mind joining forces with such an organization if we could income split, but I don't think that's likely.
I wrote some blog posts on it. You can Google it.
Yes. I know your opinion on this matter.
Any comments on that?
Look, honestly, it's a very sensitive topic. I think we shouldn't really, it's terrible that we've gone down the pathway that, like, accountants, you need to be a CPA or a CA to actually do your profession. And that obviously costs hundreds of dollars a year to maintain. But with various governments now requiring some form of certification or proof that you can do X, Y, and Z, it's not up to us anymore. We do need to do something. And I think it could be an income source for the foundation, but it needs to be community driven.
Because the question I had was around OWASP standards, right? And I think, you know, again, another nice hot topic, right? But, you know, OWASP was sort of got given a standard for free, almost on the top 10, because, you know, PCI made it a standard, right? And then you got the SVS, right? And taking in light the latest problems with supply chain security, right? And the ability to verify some of the things, what kind of our views on standards and security labels, which I think is also a super important topic, which actually a couple of sessions.
I'd like to defer to the other board members.
What's your views on standards, labels?
I like to defer to the board members because, quite frankly, this is a strategic item, and I think, you know, it's a board's role to have that strategy view.
Do you want to go first, Vandana?
Yeah, sure. See, the question that you are asking, we have had these discussions, and this is something which takes time, wherein you have to develop a curriculum, you have to work on it, and there are already so many standards which are already lying there. We are trying to collaborate with them so that OWASP can reach further heights. OWASP is one amazing place where people are here to learn. We have been open source. So involving this could be tricky. It could be something which needs a lot of brainstorming, a lot of discussions that how the curriculum should be, what are the things that we should be doing. And if, let's say, we are planning to go ahead, how it will differ from the ones that we already have. Because it's not going to be that, yes, there is a path which is already there and we're going to go ahead and follow that. Then there would not be anything different. Then why people should go with any such kind of certifications with OWASP? So it has to be something different if it will be taught in the near future or in the future. But yes, absolutely, that's a strategic decision, and that we all have to come on a platform and discuss, yes, if it's needed, let's go ahead with it and start planning for it, because that's not going to be happening in like 1 month, 2 months. It might take years as well.
Yeah, there's also significant costs involved. If we have to go to somewhere to get, you know, virtual, what's it like? It's called online proctoring or something, where they force you to have a camera on to make sure that you're not cheating. If we have to go down that pathway, OWASP can't do it. We'd have to partner with someone, and there's costs. So, Grant, your view?
The problem that we face is that OWASP is already, as you put it out, Dinis, is already seen as holding up these certifications, these standards. Yeah. The top 10 was never meant to be a standard. And I say that speaking on behalf of the individual who is still involved in that project very closely, is sitting in the room. But the top 10 is not a standard. It was never meant to be a standard. This is what the industry is showing us is the problems that we're seeing today. These are the areas that we're experiencing issues with. But it became a standard because it was snappy, it was there, and it was consistent, and it was trusted because it came from the OWASP Foundation. If we don't manage how our materials are going to be used, if we don't properly formulate standards and properly formulate the way in which things should be certified against other things, our name is going to be used to create those things and we have no control over them. The top 10 as a standard for PCI is a terrible idea. The fact that DSS has it in there scares me immensely. And I'm sure Andrew is more than a little upset that that's what they've chosen to do. The first answer to that was the ASVS. This is an actual standard. We're trying to get more towards formalizing what you should be doing. I think we need to do it, Dinis. I think it needs to be open. It needs to be completely an open curriculum. It needs to be an open way of working. How we solve the problems of exams and proctoring, that's further down the line. I think today we need to establish the standard and then find some way of protecting the OWASP brand name from being used as I provide this quick little training thing that I slap OWASP on. When you do it, you're OWASP certified and pay me lots of money and OWASP gets nothing. We got to find a way of protecting that. And to some degree, we've got that now. But I think we do need to get involved.
I think, honestly, the proactive controls, which Katie, Anton and others, Jim Bird, Jim Manico, is the correct approach that PCI should have adopted, but we didn't have it then. I'd love to collaborate with PCI to get a better version, and it should be around the the ASVS as a positive thing. Obviously, 10 things is something that's approachable. As the OWASP Top 10 co-leader, it's actually the OWASP Top 43 because there are 43 CWEs in there, some of which are categories. So I think, honestly, finding a streamlined start here, these have the most impact, positive things to do is the right way to go. And I'd love to collaborate with both PCI and ISO so that we all have a common view on what those critical things are. So generally agreed security patterns.
Yeah.
And I think the question actually just end there, which is patterns, I think is very important because it's also the maturity model, right? I think, if you take a lot of this is about, horses for courses, right? Make sure that, you're applying the right thing at the right situation, right? And the thing I would say, right, as somebody who now leads a team, right? So I now am both CISO and CTO, right? So I actually am responsible for engineering, which I highly recommend, by the way, for security, because it's a great way to push security stuff through, right? I still feel that I don't have enough levers, right? I don't have enough things that I can say, I want to put a policy that tells that we have to follow that, right? And that's where sometimes, it's better not to over-engineer these things, right? At the moment, there isn't simple things I can do, right? I want to raise the bar because that's the best way to implement this. So having standards around even tools, right? Even patterns, right? Even the usage of this, right? Where you could say, if you're going to use ZAP, in this environment, this is how you should use it, right? Because then what you're doing is you're making it easy to push it down. Like if you think about what the top 10 did, what PCI did, it made it easy for people to adopt OWASP because I need to follow the OWASP top 10. Right?
I think I'd ask the projects committee the next time I'm on with them to think about, say, AppSec in a box, like what you just described. Here's some policies, here's some tools, this is how you use them. So people who are just getting going on their journey have some basic guidance and then a roadmap to where they want to go. I think that's a really good idea.
Because that was actually my next question, right? Because one of the questions I was asked to ask you is, where do I start, right? Like where, and I think it's interesting that there's where do I start at multiple layers, right? There is, where do I start? I want to learn. I'm a novice, right? OWASP application security, where do I go? But also, I'm a new developer. I'm a security champion, right? Or I'm a more established security professional, but I have gaps here and here. So where do I start? So what's the answer today to that, apart from OWASP.org and the project lists?
So there is a project coming out of the Education and Training Committee that is literally getting started in AppSec. So that deals with I hear about AppSec, I want to know what I should be doing, or I think AppSec's cool and I'm currently doing something else and I'd like to know how to move towards it. That's the goal of that project. But I think bigger than that is I'm a new CISO, or I'm a CTO of a startup company. I have two devs, the three of us are building this product. We know AppSec is going to be important at some point once we, we're no longer eating peanut butter sandwiches. How do I make sure that I have something to go when I'm at that point? When I'm talking about putting this in front of investors, how do I make sure that I've done things right? There should be a little box that I open up. Cool, these are some policies I should be following. Okay, this is a tool I should be using to measure my code quality. Something like that, right? OWASP has got all these tools, but somebody needs to build that box and sort of define it. This is the box that you do when you're in week 12 of your startup.
Vandana, any comments to add? Oh, you muted. Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I totally agree. When we say that we are coming, so Grant mentioned one really amazing thing, that education committee is coming up with something. So we need help from the community in that. That's what we can urge. Like as a board, as part of OWASP, there are so many projects where the help is needed from the community. So we all can do this, but then when community extends the hands, I think it becomes even more meaningful. It becomes even more easy for us to achieve something like this. So absolutely.
So if somebody wants to contribute, is there a place they can go to say, what are the 3 projects that they could join tomorrow?
So if you go to owasp.org, go to projects, every project has a GitHub. You can go to the GitHub, you can help in refining the language, you can help in converting the language, converting to any language in the world. You can also contribute to the code. You can help in updating the code, any new feature that you want in that. You can actually provide your support in that, like Dependency Check just recently released their latest version. So probably in any project that you like, go ahead and support in any way possible. So Grant is supporting cornucopia. I support the whole thing. And see, we all are sharing our inputs on any one of the projects, and we are making sure that that project needs help, and we are supporting that. It can be anything. It does not need to be a technical help, but from alignment perspective, help resolving the issues, can be anything.
So another great resource is to get onto the OWASP Slack channels. If you're interested in a particular topic, the channels are pretty much defined by topics, and searching works well across Slack, as we know. So get on the Slack, talk to people there, find out where they might need help, find out where somebody is building the thing that you're already thinking of building, and work with them. Also, all of the committee meetings are published. We try to make sure that everything is published so that everybody can get on board. Sit in on a meeting, ask questions, get involved. Literally, just get involved. I would say go to your local chapter, because that's great. But your local chapter is now any chapter you like, because they're all accessible via Zoom or via Teams or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So how does one become OWASP project leader or chapter leader?
Grant, go for it.
I was going to say, I probably should defer to the people who are actually doing this, so it's primarily staff. But my understanding is, if you want to be a project leader, come up with a project and submit that as an idea, and then it'll get picked up. First thing, that checks are made to make sure that you're not overlapping with another project or something like that. And if you are, then they suggest that you go and talk to the other project lead and get involved in that project rather. When it comes to starting a chapter, it's a question of, I'm an OWASP member, I want to run a chapter in my city. There isn't one here, I'm going to submit the form. So all of that's done through the website, and it's done through like a ticketing system that the staff then handle on the back end. Is that accurate enough, Andrew?
Yeah, so at the moment we have manual processes for creating projects and chapters, and so there is a bit of review. We tend to only allow chapters to exist within 80 kilometers of another chapter. That's not always true. There are times where we allow, like with a significant travel time, we'll allow that to, chapters to exist a bit closer together. But projects, I am trying to get to a place where if people have got very similar ideas, they collaborate together, because 2 or 3 project leaders is better than 1 project leader who's struggling for the same audience as some other project. For example, is WebGoat, Security Shepherd, and a few other ones. They're all struggling for the same developer audience to help build those platforms out. And it'd be really great if they could all collaborate so we could have some really great pinnacle tools rather than a lot of difficult to maintain tools. People's interests change over time, and it's really good to have multiple leaders.
Cool. So Andrew, that question that Shivani asked, but I'll ask here. So is OWASP enough to master AppSec?
I believe that we are most of the way there. I won't claim that we're perfect. I won't claim that we've got every answer. But I do think compared to our other colleagues in the industry, like Safecode and others, we're very, very comprehensive. We also have a community that no one else has, which is another great thing. Do we have everything? No. I would love to see enterprise architecture, like security architecture, being a first-class topic. We've got lots of threat modeling, but we don't have the architecture patterns. I'd love to see us work better with frameworks. I would love to see us work on DevSecOps, that operational aspect, because configuration is becoming code. As people deploy into the cloud, there is no much sort of thing as system administration per se, because everything has changed from being pets into cattle, and you need to build many, many cattle. That is code now, and we need to cover that topic off.
Yep, cool. So another question we had, a bit of a change of gears on the OWASP top 10, that good old chestnut, right? So what vulnerabilities would you give an honorable mention this year? Meaning they're not there at the OWASP top 10, but we're very close to making it.
Have you finished the compilation of the top 10 yet, Andrew?
We've got the data. It's being analysed. We need to do some writing now between now and April. Basically, I believe XXE will probably drop off. That was more or less a solved problem once people updated the components and changed the configuration. But I'm seeing probably A9, which is dependencies, become a supply chain item this time around. It obviously has a much higher impact than it did back in 2017. And if we thought about 2017 more carefully, it is a supply chain attack back in 2017 as well. The Apache Commons library being out of date was a key issue. So I'm seeing that probably drop up. Honestly, in honorary mentions, probably injections won't be number one for the first time in the history of the OWASP top 10. I don't know what the data is, but I think OWASP has done enough in this area that developers have stopped using injectable mechanisms and frameworks have dropped support for it. So I don't think injections will be number one this time.
Cool. All right. So can you talk about, oh, sorry, guys.
I was just going to say, that's a nice sneak peek you managed to get for yourself, Dinis.
Yeah.
Nicely what, sorry?
A nice sneak peek that you managed to arrange there of the top 10 that hasn't been released yet.
There you go. Well, it's all the information is on the channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about, because I know OWASP has been participating now with other organizations, right? Like the Open Source Security Foundation and other things. Can you guys expand on what's going on there and any things that you can see coming out of it?
I do want the board to chip in this one because partnerships at that level are a board issue as well. I wish to partner with organizations that share our mission, and OpenSSF is one of those. It gets us access to a lot of the frameworks, a lot of the large developers like Red Hat and Google and Facebook and others that we wouldn't necessarily have had that access at that level. I'm hoping that we can actually fund some projects that have got commonality and common interest through that mechanism. Partnerships that we've been doing in the past have been more about marketing, co-marketing. So can you advertise this particular conference? And we're doing that with Payer2 for Nullcon and others. But I want to establish more of that deep technical roots. I'd love to get in contact with the people at Safecode and maybe do a collab. I'd love to be able to do some work with PCI and others. But it needs to be realistic. It needs to be beneficial for both parties. And I want to raise the ocean for everyone. I don't want it to be a zero-sum game.
I agree with Andrew on that we would love to partner with the organizations which share the same goal. and where we can make sure that the people who are associated with OWASP or with OpenSSF or with any foundation, they get benefited out of it, because it's the same goal, that people actually look for such communities to learn, to gain some knowledge, to explore their own skills. So absolutely, we would love to do that.
Cool. So on the topic of OWASP projects and actually chapters, on the topic of the OWASP Foundation, what does OWASP do for a project, right? So when somebody brings a project to OWASP, like, in a way, why should they do it? You know, what is the advantage of being part of the OWASP family versus not being in there?
Okay, I'll answer this one, but I do want to hear from Grant and Vandana as well. Honestly, the main reason that we're revamping the way that we do finances at the moment is that it was the policies we had up until recently were quite anti-project, and I could honestly say you were better off just starting a project at GitHub. And that's a terrible position to be in. I now want to make sure that we have project resources available that essentially, like the learning platform, AWS access, things like that. I also want to make sure that we can actually bring developers to you and a community. So if you need help to build something out, translations or whatever the case may be, because we're a common family, we can actually then say, well, this person did a top 10 translation. How would you like to do a Zap translation? And see if they could help in that way. That's some of the benefits. We're actually piloting a thing called Open Collective at the moment to allow projects to fundraise for themselves and then spend that money in whatever way they want, including taking sabbaticals and getting the job done. There were too many times when we were telling project leaders what they couldn't do, and I want to remove those barriers because it was actually harming our ability to get things done. But it was also stopping people sponsoring projects. Like, literally, people were saying, unless this could be done and this project can be built, I'm not going to give you any money. Now, I don't want to get captured by anyone. We need to put some benefits and some protections in for the foundation. Like if someone says, I want this feature in Zap, and then it can't be built. Are we on the hook for that? That's a problem. We need to make sure there's protections, but the reality is I also want to make sure that someone could come up with a realistic amount of money and say, Simon, I would really like to see this feature in Zap. Build it for me. How much will it cost? Simon gives me a figure, or the company a figure. He gets the sponsorship. He can then build it. And that moves everything forward. We get sponsorship. The project gets money. The project leader gets the ability to work on their favored project. I think this is a way forward for us to actually prevent us saying, no, project leaders, you can't do that. I want to get to a place where we can say, yes, you can do that.
So that's future project stuff. And
Yes.
there's lots of things included in both the board's view of how the foundation is going to move forward, and indeed in what Andrew's trying to do, which is one of the major reasons that Andrew was brought on board. Right now, I think basically what you get is you get given some kind of recognition, right? Your project is part of this foundation that does important things. It probably means that more people are going to look at your project than if it was just a lonely project on GitHub, but that's about it. You get the opportunity to talk about your project in the chapters. In fact, you start a project, 10 minutes after that project's published, you have 3 or 4 people from different chapters saying, hey, would you like to come talk about your new project at our chapter meetup next week or next month? So there is some marketing ability there. You definitely do get marketed internally, but I think the reality is that you just get to feel like you're part of this bigger thing, this foundation that's trying to improve software. And that does give you a bit of a branding leg up on your project. But Vandana has been doing a lot of looking at projects, right?
Absolutely. I think I am mesmerized by the support the different projects are getting, and even they are showing off their love with OWASP. Because when we talk about one project, which is something dear to us, we want to make sure that it gets the right kind of support. It gets accessibility and resources. Resources is very, very important for any project. Let's say if I am starting my new project, I would seek for help. And I think OWASP is one great home for the projects where anyone who wishes to share their knowledge, submit a project, that is there. So we are always welcome projects, and we are happy to support them in any way possible.
Cool. So I want to talk about the Spotlight project, but actually probably not here because you're also on the session tomorrow, right? And the sessions tomorrow are about, again, trying to map out, the projects, and I think that fit quite well. So I think my last question was, what are good ways to measure, right, OWASP usage in a particular company? And I asked from that point of view of, I feel that OWASP is a great resource. I want to make sure that, my company is not missing a trick, right? And again, this now goes back to measurement. How can you measure that adoption in an easy, and I guess maybe Andrew, to that thing you're talking about, that, those recipe books, or that, AppSec in a box, right? Or OWASP in a box kind of thing.
Metrics are one of those hard ones because different people have different things that are important to them. Determining the level of usage, it's a metric like, for example, I see from Google Analytics that cheat sheets, the top 10 and a few other ones are the most important projects we have. They're heavily used, heavily linked. We have hundreds of thousands of visitors to those pages every month. I don't know there's any particular way you could say that 35% of all organizations use OWASP or 100%. I don't know. But metrics are one of those things. Does it actually matter? And then is it something we can measure? If it's not something we can measure automatically, I'm not terribly sure we should try. We should be concentrating on another area. I don't want to force people into having to adopt OWASP, but I want it to be a choice that makes the most sense.
I know some projects.
Well, I want, right? I don't mind, the point is that I want to make sure that in my company, we're not missing a trick, right?
Yeah.
And there's a real value there, right? There's a real cost, right? Like if my security team or my developer team or those guys over there are doing something that OWASP has already solved, or there's a community that is looking at it, or there's a place they can come and ask questions, which is more than happy to answer questions, then literally there's a financial cost of not doing it, right? So that's what I was saying. So Andrew, I was not thinking about how OWASP measure its usage. I was saying, how does a company measure its usage of OWASP?
Okay, so you're looking at more of a maturity model type of approach. That's certainly something that we could look into. I think that AppSec in a box approach for CISOs, CTOs would actually be a really good way to address that issue. I've written it down because I think that's an important element of not missing any tricks. I think that's actually a really good idea to make sure that we have like a checklist.
Andrew, I thought Dinis offered to start that project.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I already have a couple of projects that I need to clean up, man. I already got the latest one I pushed was the OWASP security bot. We did some amazing stuff on it, but I just need to get the other one. And I still have to clean up the O2 platform, which I pushed to the next month. So I almost did a session this month, but I ran out of time, but I'll do it next month and I'll bring it back, the O2 platform.
And your maturity project, I'd like to see some changes in that.
Yeah, exactly.
O2
platform, yeah. Look, it still does stuff that still not done these days, right? I found is interesting. Cool. All right. Any final comments from you in the last couple of minutes that we have?
I just want to highlight it is our 20th anniversary this year. We were born on September 24, 2001. If the community has anything that they wish to have addressed or they'd like to see during, like for example, Dinis was here pretty much at the very beginning. I think you were one of the major people, the forces right at the very start. I would love to see panels of folks from the very, very beginning, but I'd also like to talk about past, present, and the future. So if you've got ideas about what you would like to see, please let us know, either on Slack or email or on Twitter, whatever you want. Just let us know.
Yep.
And contribute to the projects or a nearby chapter. If you don't see a nearby chapter, you want to be a chapter leader, please submit a request.
And most importantly, if you're not a member, sign up. You can get all this stuff for free, but if you're a member, you're helping us to make things better.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. This was a really cool session. We'll get the video online in a couple of hours or later today. Then I'll share with you guys. And
No worries.
good. Let me stop recording.